Danika Brysha is an incredibly successful wellness entrepreneur, body positive fashion model, and self care plus lifestyle design expert. While growing and leading these three successful businesses, Self Care Society, Model Meals, and Danika Brysha Inc., and modeling for big brands like Bare Minerals and Old Navy, she guided others to find the wellness routines that are the foundation for the life they dream of. So in 2018, she hit the road for a 66 event self care tour, a massive undertaking that we definitely pressed her to share the logistical details of. As a coach, Danica has worked with thousands of people to spread wellness and cultivate self care routines and systems that stick, and she's passionate about empowering others to come back home to themselves. Through her journey of recovery from disordered eating, food addiction, and body issues, and an overall lack of confidence, Danica uses her own experience to help others transform and thrive. This is a conversation with a very successful health coach. Please enjoy. Hi, I'm Erin Power.
And I'm Laura Rupsis.
We're certified health coaches, and this is Health Coach Radio.
This podcast is about the art, science, and business of health coaching.
We share our insider tips to help you become a better coach and entrepreneur.
And we interview expert guests to discover how they've made it in this growing field.
It's time for health coaches to make an impact.
It's time for Health Coach Radio.
Hi, Danica. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
We're super excited to have you. We love to interview entrepreneurs in this space that have found a lot of success, who have a lot to share. And you've got multiple businesses, so I'd love to talk about that. Can you tell us kind of, who you are and like how you landed here? What was your path to here?
I started with sort of my personal brand on Instagram, and I'll kind of go backwards in doing that. And it was a plus size model. And then I launched a meal delivery company called Model Meals, which was very like primal Whole30 focused. That got acquired in 2020, I think it was 2021. And then I started a company called Self Care Society in 2020, which is kind of like it's kind of like a Peloton of self-care and personal development. And that's like what I'm doing actively now. So I'll just kind of reverse to how I got here. I struggled a lot growing up with food and body. I was always a bigger girl. I'm 5'10", I'm a size 14. I was always bigger than most of my friends. And I think especially at that time, all I saw in the media was stick thin and in a certain way. And so dieting was like my focus. And once I started dieting when I was maybe 13 or 14 and did, all the diets, eventually lost a lot of weight on Atkins, got a lot of sort of validation. And unfortunately, I think validating a lot of the beliefs I had that my weight was dependent upon my worth. I wish I could say I lost the weight and I didn't experience that, right? But that was the truth, unfortunately, at that time in high school and all that. And so I kind of became addicted to that. And I decided that, my dream was if I could model one day, like I would be so happy. And so the only models I saw were 00. And so it was just this mission to lose weight. And so I was on that for a while, and eventually diets turned into disordered eating and was severely bulimic and got into drugs and alcohol and kind of all the things. And eventually, over time, just was like so mentally exhausted from the amount of energy I put into trying to change myself and specifically my body. And after college, I was living in LA, and I sort of, I read a book by Janine Roth called Women, Food, and God, and, a variety of other things, and just surrendered. And I was like, I am so tired of putting all this energy into weight loss. Like, what if I put this energy into anything else? And so settled sort of in my natural body, which I said was a size 12, 14. Funny enough, a couple months after that, I was approached at Bank of America and asked if I'd ever thought about modeling, and signed into the plus size industry, which was super interesting. And I always say that was this moment, this first reminder for me of that life, that if I stopped trying to be what I wasn't, what I desired all along would come to me in easier ways. And so I signed eventually with Wilhelmina Models, and now I'm with IMG Models out of New York. I was modeling for Forever 21 and Target and, like Bare Minerals, all the big brands. I moved to New York City. I saw it as an opportunity to start fresh. I had still been like partying and I don't think taking care of myself very well. And so I moved at the very end of December of 2013. And so January was upon us. I love like a new year and a fresh start. So I found the Whole30, and I did the Whole30 for the month of January in 2014. Totally changed my life. and sort of followed it. And it evolved into meditation and movement and journaling and mindset and like all the stuff that, sometimes comes when you change your energy and all that. And feel free to interrupt me at any time or else I'll just keep going. Okay. And it changed my life. And I started sharing my journey on Instagram, which was kind of pretty early in the Instagram days, and sharing recipes and sharing just this evolution. And so what happened was I started losing weight. I was kind of like a size 8, 10 at that point. And I lost all my modeling jobs because I was no longer big enough for plus size, but I was not small enough for regular. So I was in this like no man's land that, there wasn't a lot of work. And so I started a company and I decided, well, like, what am I passionate about? I was doing all this personal development work and I thought, what am I passionate about? And it was the way that food impacted my life. I was like, wow, people need to know about this and I need to make it easier for them to eat this way. So I started my company, a meal delivery company out of my studio apartment in New York City called Model Meals. Started delivering meals around New York, got super into debt, moved back to California, moved in with my parents in their garage for 2 years where I lived, and then kind of restarted the business. And I grew that for the last 7 years pretty organically. And as I mentioned, that got acquired in about 2021, I think it was. And then in 2018, I went on tour. I did a tour. We called it the Brunch Series Tour. And it was a women's sort of self-care and personal development tour. My partner is a professional chef. So we did 66 events all over the United States for thousands of women. And I learned a lot during that experience. And I think one of my key takeaways was that I really needed to help people bridge the gap between knowledge and action when it came to taking care of themselves. I felt like I was giving them a lot of knowledge and like, here's what to do, but they were getting stuck at how to do it and how to stay consistent with it. And so that's where Self-Care Society stemmed from, was a way to make this mental, emotional health work consistent and make it a daily practice and make it fun and take the guesswork out of it. And so we started Self-Care Society in 2020, which is sort of a, live 30-minute classes taught by all different sort of health coaches and therapists and all that. And that's where I've been investing my time now. And then as of most recently in January, I had my first child. So new mom. I have a little, how old is she? 8-month-old girl. Oh. And we live in Las Vegas have my own mini homestead. I'm really into, I got my master gardener certification. So I don't know, I guess the summary of this whole story is just, I think, permission to follow whatever inspires or lights you up in any given moment, and that we don't have to stay the same or do one thing for our whole life, or pivot. And I know you work with many coaches, and the idea that I think that whatever they're sharing and wherever that passion comes from is going to evolve, and that's okay. So,
oh yeah,
oof,
here we are.
Oh my! I feel like I can relate to so much of your story. And there's so much for us collectively to pull apart there and talk about in this conversation, because we have your serial entrepreneur sort of tendencies and starting lots of different things. And I love hearing stories about starting a thing that then gets acquired and what that process is like. And even, like starting things, ending things, moving to new things, this idea of evolution. That was a huge story of evolution. And even how you're using health coaches in your work. There's a lot we can unpack. I don't even know where to start. I feel like the first question that popped up for me listening to your story is, I feel like you were really open to whatever came your way. Like, was there ever a time where you doubted the potential of evolution, or did you always know it was possible to become whatever you wanted to become?
I think probably a mixture of both. I think I'm very fortunate to be raised in a way that my parents encouraged that. I also think I took a lot of messaging from the media that I wasn't enough, and that I needed to achieve and do to be worthy, not just in body, but also, as we know, with hustle culture and achieving and all that. So I think there was a little bit of both, but I do think, I struggled with confidence for so long that I think when I actually found confidence, and a lot of that for me actually came through plus size modeling, I really sunk into it. And so I feel quite confident. And I do believe that if there's something I can dream up, I can create it. But it doesn't always mean that I think I'm going to be wildly successful, but I think I find the courage to at least try.
Cool. And the reason why I asked that question, I don't know if it sounded like it came out of left field, but I've been thinking through this from the perspective of all these health entrepreneurs that we speak to, / the ones that we teach and mentor in our school that Laura and I work for. And I feel like there's something to be said about the belief that it's possible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always going to be easy. In fact, it's quite often not going to be easy. And the culture is going to push up against you, and your own self-talk is going to push up against you. But somewhere underneath has to be a belief that it's possible. And even through very hard times, I feel like you still had that belief, and look at you. Like, look what happens when you harness that belief.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. And I think that's a lot of the work that I feel so called to do now as I work in this sort of self-care space, is really helping people give themselves permission to even say their dreams out loud and then to go after them. I think we live there's no better time to be able to have the resources to start a business or grow something. I mean, there's so many cool things nowadays that can support that, and without millions of dollars in funding and all that. So yeah, I mean, I think that for me, it's really important that people feel like they can, do it and succeed. And I think success looks different to everyone. I always desired something big. Like when I started Model Meals, I was like, I want to have a national or, international company. So I will say I started with that perspective. It was never like, I want to have this little mom and pop sort of thing. So maybe that helped a little bit, but, yeah, I don't know. You, as I'm sure you both know, it flies by. Like you're so in it when you're doing it, and to sit back and reflect, it's really, interesting to look and see, okay, what was I thinking? What was guiding me?
I know. I think it's so fun to do that, actually.
Yeah.
I wrote down, permission to follow whatever lights you up. We recently published the most recent episode that we just published was with a coach who talks a lot about, women in particular and all the things that tend to get in our way, and feeling guilty in following whatever lights you up. Right. And to your point, the whole hustle culture and just society at large, just what a big downer. I see so much in, we have our own ads for the school that Erin and I work for. And there's always some Yahoo that's like, this is a bunch of, excuse my language, BS. Just go get a degree somewhere, go to college and get a degree. And I'm sitting there but by the way, in your story, I didn't hear that from you at all. It doesn't matter whether you have a degree. What you have are skills. What you have is this personality, drive, and personal experience that you're able to pull together and create something of value for someone. And this notion that, and don't get me wrong, I'm an advocate for education, but I don't think you necessarily have to go get the degree just for the sake of getting a degree and go $100,000 into debt to pursue whatever lights you up, right?
Yeah. The degree is the same barrier that I hear from any entrepreneur that is thinking of all of the things that they need to do before they launch or before they start. Yeah. So I think I agree. Education nowadays, what's so beautiful is you can get education in so many different ways. And I am so not attached to whether that comes from a formal institute like Harvard, or you've watched 25 YouTube videos, or you've lived, there's so many different ways. And I think that as long as you're living your truth and sharing, and you're getting education in the way that aligns for you, obviously, listen, we know that there's a gray line because there's some medical things that
there are some degrees, but you want to be an attorney,
right? Exactly.
Go get a degree, right?
But I do think to a certain extent, for me, I sort of fell into this space of coaching or whatever we could call it, because I shared my story and people are asking questions and they wanted to know how I did what they watched this transformation in my own life. And I think that that's the most authentic way to show up. And so many people who get into health coaching or any kind of coaching, that's why they're there, is because, wow, my life transformed because I did this thing. And I want other people to know this is available to them.
Yeah. Absolutely. And how many people are limited precisely because what they went into is not what that lights them up.
Right.
They're just looking to get through the stinking day so that they can go home and cuddle with the dog or the kids or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
And again, I love that too, but there's so much about being limited by following a quote unquote conventional or traditional path, because I went to school for accounting because that's a real job. My parents told me that was a real job, but accounting doesn't light me up. I'm literally just putting in the hours until I'm done.
Right.
And then I can go live my real life. Whereas I can say with absolute sincerity that what I do now, for the most part, look, there are aspects of what I do that aren't my favorite, but broadly speaking, it doesn't feel like work, right? This is my calling and this is what I want to lean into.
I feel like this was my experience with modeling, because for so long I thought that modeling was like, this is my lifelong dream, and I'm so glad that I started in my 20s and did it long enough to realize that it was super mind numbing. Like, to be honest, I'm grateful for the experience, and the money was good. But like, I always think back to, what if I worked my whole life for this goal? And maybe when I was 50 or 60, I landed it right. And I realized it didn't light me up. And I think it's just validates how important it is for us to try on, like we would an outfit, try on these desires in whatever way you can right now. Not when the degree's over, especially before you invest in a degree. If you want to get a degree, if you want to, but try it on first. Make sure that nursing or coaching or whatever it is you want to go after feels really good to you. And so I think that's what we see a lot is a lot of unfulfilled people, because they followed a path that we can get into a huge conversation around what we think we should do or what society has told us we should do or whatever it is. And that's so much of my passion, is helping people uncover in this moment, in this season of life, what is lighting you up and how can you try it on right now? Which is, I think, what you're alluding to. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I love it. And I heard you say putting all this energy. So why am I putting all this energy into weight loss? Oh my gosh. That phrase right there. You could take out weight loss and put something else when it's not getting you where you need to go. Right. And from a health coaching perspective, I know this no doubt rang true for Erin too, because she and I both kind of focus in a similar area. All these women that have spent years putting tremendous energy into weight loss. Yeah. What else could they have accomplished? Who else could they be if they weren't putting all their energy into weight loss? And the same thing holds true to putting all that energy into being an administrative assistant or whatever it is.
Right. 100% into anything, or into your phone, scrolling in bed at night, right? In any micro case of our day as well. So yeah, I remember having that thought and being like, wow, I'm like an expert in weight loss to a certain extent. I mean, I haven't really significantly lost a lot of weight, but
you tried hard.
The path to get there.
Yeah. I think when we're doing this kind of exploration, it's with absolute curiosity and non-judgment. Right. So explore whatever you want to explore and just be open to collecting the data, good, bad, or indifferent. Let's just really see if this works for me. And then be prepared to pivot and be okay with pivoting. I think we just put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And then there's judgment that comes along with pressure. I should go get this job. I should go get this education because that's what's done. Whether or not it lights me up, I don't know. It's this sort of like martyrdom almost that we've kind of been born into. But I love this part of the story too, which was that what if I put all this energy that I'm putting into dieting into myself? And that's kind of what we just finished up with. What if I took all this energy and put it into something productive? But that starts with first acknowledging the unproductive energy. So you just name dropped scrolling. I'm sure that was triggering to a lot of people listening, including yours truly. What if I put all of the effort that I spent consuming content into creating content? It'd be a completely different story. But approaching that with non-judgment, just accept it at face value and then do something with it. Yeah, I would love to see more coaches doing that, more entrepreneurs doing that.
Yeah, that's probably the thing. I'm so glad you brought that up, Erin. One of the things when I guide my self-care society classes, anything where we're looking at something where I know people are going to be prone to beating themselves up, I'm like, curiosity, not judgment, curiosity, not judgment. And that's a skill, I think, or a muscle that evolves. I was just sharing in my class, I guess it was yesterday. I was like, I can get, I don't know, it's just so beautiful to be in a place where you can give yourself permission to it's not so black and white. Permission to sleep an extra hour, permission to not do the routine perfectly. Like it's a permission to understand that what works for me today might not work for me in a month, like it's just, there's something as you evolve and do this work. And like, I feel like most people, I for sure was this way in the beginning. It was rigid and harsh and black and white. And now I think, people talk about the elusive balance, and I don't know, like, I feel, is that real? I'm not sure, but I really do feel a lot of just gentleness in this personal development, if that's even the right word, right? But in this space.
Kindness. I've been pushing on this idea of self-kindness in the group program that I'm running right now. And it's so funny that you say this about perfectionists, because literally I had an email to my email list that went out. It's scheduled to go out as we started this conversation. So the email went out, we started the conversation, we pressed record. And the email was, perfection's not working for you, period. Because I just had a discovery call with a client yesterday who said, listen, I'm actually kind of I'm like a 100% or nothing kind of guy. I don't do well at anything less than 100% abstinence from bad things. I was like, you just told me 10 ways that's not working for you. You just explained to me all the ways that perfection is literally not working for you. So for me, the self-kindness piece, the word you used was, I forget the word that you used, balance. For me, it's nuance. Sure. So in some seasons of your life and in some aspects of your life, we can strive for perfection. This guy's example was, well, I abstain from alcohol because I have a problematic relationship with alcohol. That works for me for alcohol. I should be able to do the same thing with food. And it's like, but it's not the same.
Right.
Like, we got to explore the nuance. And I think there's something really kind about that.
Yes.
So that's, working with our clients, but we have to put this, we always say this, whatever as coaches we're offering to our clients, we have to bring it in and live it as well. So offer yourself kindness, offer yourself the gift of exploring nuance, and acknowledge that perfection is not a great goal.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Keto, carnivore, paleo, AIP, SCD, low FODMAP, so many diets, so much confusion. And if health coaches are having a hard time keeping up, imagine how clients must feel. To make sense of it all, Primal Health Coach Institute partnered with registered dietitian and health coach Martha Tettenborn to create a comprehensive functional therapeutic diet specialist certification. This flexible online course dives deep into the many different types of therapeutic diets. You'll learn the purpose of each of these diets and how to help your clients map out a nutritional plan to resolve their specific health issues. As a certified functional therapeutic diet specialist, you'll help people reach a deeper understanding of food as medicine and transform their lives for the better. Find out more at primalhealthcoach.com.
I was talking to a friend of mine. He's a high school friend of mine who helped build my website because I know nothing about building websites. He knows very little about health and nutrition at the time. So we swapped services and he built me a website. And he was telling me about this a podcast he was listening to, and this concept of killing your clone every day. And I'm like, what? That sounds terrible. What do you mean by that? And the idea is just, rather than being either the same every single day, let's work on just being 1% better, and just little by little improving that clone every single day. Doesn't have to be this big reach, it's just focusing on being maybe just 1% better, doing something a little bit different that drives you closer to where you want to be every single day, rather than sitting mired in whatever's present right now that's bothering you, which I think there's a lot of value in that. But then there's also, I think, a lot of value in being honest and open and okay with kind of where you are now, because you arrived there for a reason.
Yeah.
You're right here for a reason. All the decisions and all the things that have happened over time has led you here. So this whole I'm not supposed to be here needs to go away. The judgment needs to go away of that statement to, okay, how did I get here and what can I learn from that? And what kind of progress, not perfection, can I make tomorrow and sort of the next day? And I do think having these big, lofty goals like you had, like, I want to make this a worldwide. I mean, I think that's a phenomenal goal, but don't let that the sheer enormity of that goal stop you from making the 1% improvement on moving in that direction. So do you mind sharing a little bit about Because look, I mean, our mentor, Mark Sisson, he started his own food-based company and eventually sold that. I mean, there's a lot of people where this is a goal, right? Is to create something really amazing that somebody else kind of will buy. I mean, was that part of your goal? And eventually something like that happened. And why meals? Because that sounds to me, the one nice thing with coaching, there's not a whole lot of overhead.
Right.
Yeah. Whereas, boy, building meal delivery, there's a lot of overhead there. There's a lot of moving parts. So I'm fascinated.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason that I'm working technology now instead of
physical
prepared perishable meals. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So much stuff here. So just a couple things I just want to touch on before I jump into that is just like, I have a deep passion for helping people understand that a happy life or a great life is just a series of happy days or great days. And so much of what I come to now is I love to help people create a formula for a great day. And so much of this stems from the recovery communities. Both my partner and I are sober, and their whole process. I remember it was like, and I was in Overeaters Anonymous, and I remember the thought process of like one day at a time, one moment at a time, 1 hour at a time. And what I realized is like, everyone's just looking to create a happy life or whatever it is. And if we can just focus on a happy day, if you stack enough of those happy days together, you're creating a happy life, and it's so much less overwhelming. So I think you touched on that in a way. And that's really what, for me, when we started Self-Care Society, that was what it was. I was like, how do I help people just like, let's just look at the day. Let's look at these 30 minutes we have together. Regarding the business, no, I don't think I was ever looking to sell it. I don't think I knew enough about that as an option to have it as a goal, but isn't that the beautiful part about setting goals is like, we can get there in a lot of different ways, so that's a big part of my belief is like, I love goal setting. I do like a big end of new year program, every year. This is the 5th year and I love it, but I'm really big also on like, there has to be this balance of setting the goal and then also surrendering the how. So when I started the business, like, I think that at the time, I was so new to this concept. I'd read like 4-Hour Work Week. I was so new to the concept of an unconventional work life, that I don't think I knew to set it as a goal, let alone a public company. And then having like stock in a public company, like it was like a whole new world. And I felt it was so exciting to learn about because I mean, it was just, I love to learn. And I know you both love to learn, like that's why we're here, right? I'm sure a lot of coaches can resonate with, I just want to learn all the time. And so it was really cool. And it wasn't a goal, but it was the right thing. And the industry is really challenging. I'm not going to sit here and say it's not. When we started, there weren't as many players. I mean, we were not only are we shipping perishable food, and now you look at the cost of gas and, there's the packaging conversation about sustainability. There's the way that we source our food. It's really important to me to source pasture raised and organic and all these things. But like at some point, no one's going to pay $30 for a meal. And so the industry is just it's really challenging. And I'm super proud of what we built. And the company is still doing well today, but I'm not working in the day-to-day of it anymore. But it was challenging. And like I said, I have to honor, for me, my personality is like every 5 or so years, I'm just ready for something new. And so I think what I learned through model meals was that that's probably my path unless things change, is like, whatever's start something, nurture it, grow it to a certain point, pass it off, whether I stay an owner or I sell it or something, and then start the new thing that's lighting me up, because that creation process is what for me is the most fun.
Nice. Yeah. Stick with it until it's time to do something else.
Yeah, because there's someone who loves to run businesses, right? I believe that's how the world works, is if we all really lean into these things that feel really natural to us and aligned, is that the puzzle pieces all fit together. And me not hanging on to this thing that I don't want to run anymore, and it's making me feel like tired and burnt out, is keeping it from being passed along to someone who would love that challenge. And that's new and exciting for them. And so I think, Laura, you had alluded to like people feeling like it's selfish for them to go after whatever goals and dreams they have. And I always talk about in self-care, it's like self-care is the least selfish thing that we can do for ourselves and for others, because we can either give to people from the overflow or we can give to people from the backwash. And we just don't realize, especially, as parents and mothers and all that sort of stuff too. So, I just hope that I can always inspire and encourage people to go after what's lighting them up today and to not take it so seriously. And I think if you actually don't think of it as something that has to be a lifelong path for you, then you're actually more likely to do it today than feeling like you can start health coaching in 5 years or 10 years, you know?
Mhm.
Really nice. That's a really nice message. And earlier when you were kind of teeing up your evolution into the self-care society, you name checked hustle culture,
Mhm.
which I hate so much, but like we are really trained into it. So now you come into the self-care society with this energy that what you just shared about, it's a disservice to me to keep doing a thing that I'm not feeling authentically aligned with. And it's a disservice to somebody else who would love to take on that challenge. That's such a freeing line of thinking. So when you bring that energy into the self-care society, what kind of pushback do you get? Like how hard is it for your clients in this community to let go of their desire for it to suck? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm like my number one client in this circumstance. Like I have to fight me the hardest to not do all the things. And I love a checklist and a
Mhm.
spreadsheet and a project management. And I believe that it can be deeply self-care. So I use Asana, which is a project management tool, it's kind of just like a checklist. And I use that thing in the most loving and empowering way, mostly, because I schedule in my self-care. This is just what works for me, because for me, what I believe is that if it is my responsibility to remember all the things that I need to do in my huge life, I have this amazing, huge, robust life that I've built, which is amazing, but it comes with a lot of responsibility. And I don't want to have to remember all that. That's stress. That's me carrying around stress every day. And so I do think that there's a way to take this like sort of productivity energy and this doing energy and this traditionally more masculine energy and use it to our advantage. And also weave in things like white space. This is a concept I learned from my coach. And it's just the act of scheduling white space in your calendar to have unscheduled time. So in self-care society, I think that I think people want it. So they embrace the lack of hustle so much. But I'll tell you, to be honest, it's a balance for me every day, because it's like, okay, we're showing up and doing, like, I guess the ultimate anti-hustle culture thing to do in class would be to just like sit there and laugh or something. You know what I mean? But like, I want to take action. So I'll be honest when I say that, like, I'm still really navigating what that balance looks like for me as someone who's super driven, motivated, likes to get shit done,
Yeah.
and knows that I burn out really easily. And I think I don't know. I don't have a good answer. I wish I did.
Well, I think what you've articulated there is this, again, concept of nuance.
Yes.
So it's not black and white. It's not I'm either hustling or I'm slacking off. There's all this gray area. And so for a productive person like yourself, we're scheduling the white space into the Asana app. That might not be somebody else's cup of tea, but that's okay. What is that for you? And it's so interesting because I really geek out on productivity as well. I have the time block planner from Cal Newport, and I have a block of time for I'm going to lie down and rest. I'm going to make some food and eat it. I'm going to sit down and stare off into space. Like I actually put that into my time block planning because I'm a productive person that has a lot of stuff to get done, including taking care of myself.
Yeah.
And it's a muscle you got to train. It's like, this is a non-negotiable part of being a human being.
Right.
And especially if you're completely forgotten, completely de-glorified.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I'm literally of the opinion you aren't a proper human unless you're deeply resting frequently.
And Erin, I'll tell you, having an 8-month-old, like I am really relearning all of that.
Yeah.
But I really have, like, it's amazing that you do that. And I always have to remind people, it's like, that's productivity too.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is we tend to look at productivity as like answer the emails, do the outreach, whatever. And I think there's a reprogramming that you obviously already believe, which is rest is productive and self-care and health is productive. But a lot of our culture doesn't. Emotional, mental health work is productive, And so I think that we're not all looking, what am I saying? Like, it's not about us looking for less productivity. It's about us looking for more, like a more mindful way of how we do things and what we spend our time on.
Yeah.
More intention.
Yes.
This in terms of like from a health coach perspective, and we talk a lot about how the benefit of all work is going to come sort of in the aftermath of letting that work. So this, I'm drawing this analogy to exercise because I'm thinking in terms of this. I teach CrossFit classes and what have you. And I don't know how many times I've told, look, guys, the benefit of this workout right now is going to come from the rest afterwards. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I want you to take from every class is, what do you need from this right now? And what are you trying to accomplish moving forward? And if you're always like, my husband and I always joke, I'm like a shark. I feel like sometimes if I sit down, I lose all my mojo. Like I just always have to be kind of up and moving and sort of doing something and busy.
Yeah.
But then the problem that happens is when I do sit down, boy, do I crash.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And to the point where I'm sitting down to such a degree that when I get back up, it hurts or it's uncomfortable, right? And so I totally hear what you're saying in terms of finding purposeful rest time that isn't just, now I have to sit down and relax or I'm going to sort of fall apart, right? That's not productivity either, because to your point, Erin, like all I want to do is sit and scroll through Twitter or something completely mindless where my mind is taken off of everything else versus kind of writing things down and time blocking out purposeful moments of time in your day to do something that benefits just you as a human being so that you can be more productive in all your other work. And this is a huge lesson for health coaches working with clients that are busy. Busy working parents is an example of one that I know a lot of health coaches kind of tap into. So I would love for you to speak a little bit to sort of this, what do you call it? Self-care society. You're calling it a society. Any particular meaning behind that particular word versus maybe some other word, and kind of what does this group feel like?
Society was mostly born from the idea of community. I think that we hear a lot about self-care, which is very important, but we have to also consider community care, which I think speaks to the fact that it's not always us caring for ourselves. Like sometimes there are times where we really need to be cared for by others. And so Self-Care Society was really inspired by our tour that we did. And most of the tour events were about 50 or 60 women held in people's homes around the country. And what I noticed would happen just as I facilitated conversation and questions was just how powerful the connection was when people were in real life and dropping the masks. And we'd start with like a super vulnerable exercise that people were like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? And then, but like the mask, you would literally see people like take their shoes off and put their hair up and like do physical interpretations of, oh, I'm more comfortable. I can drop the mask. It was so interesting. And so that's what we really aimed to make accessible was, how can we do this daily practice? How can we do it in community? There are recordings available, but the live classes, there's a ton of engagement in the chat. And the foundation of Self-Care Society, in addition to making it really easy to do this sort of mental, emotional work on a daily basis in like bite-sized chunks, the other foundation is that you are your best guide. You are your best coach. And you can seek inspiration outside yourself, but I want you to seek answers within. And so it's really about like when I teach a class, usually there's about 5 activities I do. There might be a journaling, affirmations, gratitude, manifestation, intentionality. Like there's just a lot of, most of it's like writing based. So you bring a journal or wherever you like to do it. And it's really just like a prompt and examples. And then you take time and music plays and you write it, and then people share in the chat and people can come on camera and volunteer if they'd like to. And it's just a really beautiful community driven space to practice self-care.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Okay. I want to get into some logistics actually. So I
love logistics.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, we love talking. So we love talking to folks like you, and we love talking about the meaning and the feelings behind how we, our calling. That's really important to talk about. And it's also really interesting to talk about. And then like, how are you executing this like on the ground? Right.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of curiosity about the Self-Care Society, and I want to know the logistics of that, but I'm very, very curious about the logistics of this tour. So because live events, there was a period of time. Oh my gosh, I feel like such a fool. We should go back in the archives of the podcast because I think it was 2019. We did our annual wrap up. This is hilarious. Laura and I did our annual wrap up, and then in 2019, it was like, what do you predict is going to be the big move next year? And I was like, live events. It was like, yeah. But live, I think we're on the uptick now for live events. I just went to one. I feel alive, right? So what you're talking about is a live event. Those are hard to plan, I imagine. I've never done it, but also you're touring the country and hosting people at other people's homes. Like, how does that even?
I really love that you ask these questions. Like, I'm like so pumped right now to talk about the logistics of these things because it's so important. I'm like so glad that y'all focus on that. So what we did was first we wanted to prove our concept. So we did an event at our house. We lived in a back house in Orange County. Like, we barely had a yard. My landlord was cool. I mean, I had a 200-pound English Mastiff. So he was pretty flexible with me in general. So I thought, okay, we're going to do this event. Sold out in like 4 hours or whatever it was. And then we added a few more. So we did a few of these events before we left our house. I'd also started following like the bucket list family on social media and some of these like more sort of like nomadic families and the digital nomad lifestyle. And I love like if something sparks my excitement, I'm like, I'm doing it. Mm-hmm. So it was very interesting to me, this concept of getting rid of all of my belongings and living remotely and all that. So part of me was like, yeah, I'd like to do that. So then we just had so much demand. So I put out a Google form and I said, if you would be open to hosting one of our events at your home, if we did this tour, like, submit. And they had to be like, okay with my English Mastiff being there. And there was like, they had to have a certain amount of whatever. And man, I wish I could remember, but I want to say we got like 200 submissions of people putting their hosting a bunch of random people at their house. And so we had this Google form and then we sort of plotted the tour. I scheduled us way too thin, it was a lot. We started by doing Airbnbs and then we started doing, I had a Squarespace website I sold tickets through. I had 2 sort of like part-time event planners that helped me. And they were great. And they really handled a lot of logistics for the event, but we set it up, broke it down, drove between cities. We did it all. It was a lot. It's a lot.
Wow.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that grassroots logistics. I love hearing that. I had a Squarespace website.
Yeah. Not that complicated. I really will say it was not that complicated. And it was very structured in the sense of, once we did it a couple of times, we knew it was like, here's the info you give the host. And here's so it was very repeatable in that sense. Yeah. It was a lot on us physically, but yeah.
You know what? One of the qualities I think you need to have, just to close the loop on that, is how do I articulate this? It's like, I'm going to do this crazy thing with my Squarespace website and my Google form and these 200 strangers who offer their houses. But it's almost like one of the qualities you have to have is it's going to work, or I have a plan B, or I'm not going to panic about the potential hiccups that could occur. Yeah. I'm an organized person. I can handle it. Like it's sort of an energy to bring to it. You don't need a ton of technology. You didn't use a ton of technology.
Yeah.
And this belief that it's going to be okay. Let's just go and do it and see what happens. That sort of beginner's mind. I think that's really crucial. That's why people don't do stuff like that. It's like, no, but what if it fails? It's like, yeah, what if it does? So what could possibly go wrong? Like, let's troubleshoot it.
I already got rid of all my stuff. So,
right. Yeah. I think pre-selling, I pre-sold tickets. So I was sort of like on the hook to get it done. And I will say, I think what you just touched on is something in my personality that's almost like a bit of we'll call it like a character defect, but it works for me. It's like my assistant goes crazy. I'll you don't need to, we'll put that off. We don't need to respond to that. I'm much more like, I'll ask for forgiveness instead of permission, which I'm not saying is what you should do, but it's just my personality to just do it. And it typically works out. And if it doesn't, I've worked like a lot of my different coaches I've worked with, they'll have me go down what's the worst case scenario path. And you find when you do that exercise, which I'm sure you're familiar with, is like, it always works out.
Yeah. Or it's never the worst case scenario is usually something tiny.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, can I survive that? So logistically, you had planned out these stops at either someone's house or Airbnb. How many people did you have at each event? How long were they? What was the experience of the event? How much did you charge for people to attend these things?
I believe we charged $140 per ticket. The event was 6 hours. Logistically, what we did was we had events mostly on Sundays, and then we would have smaller cities we'd have on a Wednesday. And then if we had a big city that sold out Sunday, we'd add a Saturday event. So there were some weeks that we were doing 3 events. Keep in mind that we would go the day before, we would go to Costco and get everything for the food. And then we would go and set up the event. I'm talking about tents and 60 chairs and tables, and like, it was a whole ordeal. And then we would get there like 4 hours before the event on the morning of the event. And I think it started at like 7, if I recall. We would get there 4 or 5 in the morning, and we would set it up, and then we'd break the event down. So usually that took about 2 hours after everyone left. And then we would typically drive to the next city. So we load up the RV and our SUV and the trailer, and then we would drive to the next city, which, to be honest, was actually self-care time, because when you've been around people all day, to just be in the car and drive for like 2 hours. We just love that. And we eventually started by being in our Airbnbs in terms of where we were staying. Then we eventually bought an RV, and it had a million different problems on the road, but it was really nice to not have to like unpack and pack. And then the actual experience of the event was there was, snacks and a meal and whatever, but it was really like you're sitting in a circle, usually about 50 to 60 people, but some cities we had as low as maybe like 12. So sometimes it was a little more intimate. I think actually the smallest was 8, maybe it was 12. And we did cancel some events along the road. Like there was maybe like a couple that either like the schedule was going to be crazy or just didn't sell enough like to make it worth it. But the event was just like a sort of evolution. Like I taught how to do my self-care checklist. I had people sort of do a lot of dream work around like what their desires were and manifestation exercises, some self-love sort of work, just a lot of that kind of stuff that we teach in Self-Care Society now.
Awesome. That sounds great. I love that. Gosh, I have a million more logistics questions left, but I'm not going to ask them because I'm getting into the weeds. Did you have your own? Yeah. Did you have your own tent and your own chairs in the trailer? Like, anyways, I'm not going to ask that question. That's I do. I want to swing over to Self-Care Society because while you were describing it, you kind of mentioned off the cuff, we have practitioners and health coaches that we work with. So really curious to know the logistics of the Self-Care Society. So this I'm assuming an online group program. Is it a membership? Is it like how are we doing here?
Yeah. So my business partner is my brother on this. He comes from a marketing and sort of web background, not development, but enough to kind of do something. So we actually built a custom platform for this, and it's quite janky. It's not like great. We're making some changes, but it works. It's carried us for the last, 2.5 years or whatever it's been. So it's a membership community. So it's just like a flat rate, or we did like annual passes this year as well. And you have unlimited access to our live and on-demand classes, as well as the community. And so you log in and you can go to the live schedule. As of now, we have, I think 8 or 9 live classes each week. So we have morning and nights. The people who teach them are a variety of like life coaches, therapists, that sort of thing. I like really scouted hard initially. I went out and just kind of looked at people's expertises. I looked at people's camera presence. I looked at, obviously, like diversity was really important for me to get a diverse group of people. And then we had kind of like an initial audition. And then most recently, and you can still apply to this. So for anyone if this sounds interesting, you can still apply to be a substitute. And if our substitutes are awesome, eventually we'll look into hiring people full time. We did like a open submission for people who wanted to coach, or to be one of our guides. And, everyone teaches classes. Everyone does different stuff. Like we have the woman who's an actual therapist. She works specifically with LGBTQ communities, but really everyone. And she does a lot more of the deeper, like mother wound, like that sort of kind of that stuff. Whereas like I teach mindful motivation on Monday mornings, and that's really about like intentional productivity. We have people who do like EFT tapping in their classes. We have like real like self-love experts. We have some of the like really woo stuff that people love, just kind of like the manifesting and visualizing all that. So it's a nice mix for everyone. I think there's enough. And really what's cool is our on-demand library right now is over 600 classes. They're all 30 minutes and you can search anything. So you could go in and say like, I'm struggling with boundaries. And if you type boundaries, like all the classes about boundaries might pop up. Or if you're really needing, to look at if like self-confidence, so it's really cool. And that's what I say it's the Peloton of self-care, just in the sense of like how the actual logistics work of the community, if people are familiar with that.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds really neat. So like there's always a library of different events from the normal to the woo. And so your members can decide which ones they want to jump into, as many or as few as they want. And then it sounds like all of those sessions are recorded and then put into the library and searchable by keyword.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then there's a community. So we have circles, which are kind of like groups. And there's communities. So there's communities of people who are struggling with infertility or have are going through grief or over 50 or, like there's a lot of that. So it's sort of evolved on its own. It's still quite small. Like our member base is close to 1,000. It's not like a huge community at this stage. I think that a lot of the work probably that you both do and that I do is not necessarily mainstream yet. And I think that it might feel that way sometimes because we're like in it, but we've had a hard time getting people to understand what it is that we do and why it's valuable. But we're getting there.
Yeah. 1,000 clients is incredible. And I we talk about this a lot, Laura and I both, is because we educate and certify coaches who then go on to start businesses and they have an appetite for scaling and becoming sort of in thought leadership, which is amazing. It's again, one of those big, big lofty goals, and we should have them. But like you start with a 1 client and 100 clients is amazing. 1,000 clients is incredible. Like you'd be set for life if you had 1,000 raving fans.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course. And I think it depends on everyone because like I'm such an advocate for working with coaches. I'm working with a coach right now who's just like, I've worked with her before and it's a big investment, but she's just, I just know for a fact that when I'm working with a coach on whatever in my life feels like I want the support, like I always earn that money back. You always do, right? Like, and then some, and because of the investment in yourself, whether it's your health or mental, whatever. So I'm such an advocate for that. And my coach and I, talk about that a lot, just like, I don't know, it's just really powerful stuff.
It is.
What do you look for in a coach that you hire? Because this comes up a lot in our own community of coaches on, almost afraid to pull the trigger and hire a coach. Because to your point, I would agree with you. The same thing with education. Like there are courses that I've taken that I spent money on that, I don't know, it wasn't necessarily what I expected or what have you, but I never felt like I was jilted in any way. Like education, I always get my money back in some capacity. Certainly over time. But in terms of coaching, there's some folks that have had just unbelievable experiences with an amazing coach and others that are like not a good fit. They're afraid to kind of take that leap for themselves because it sounds a lot of these business coaches and like they're really expensive.
Yeah.
But gosh, if you're able to turn around and earn back what you just paid in a couple of months because your revenue's gone up, it's 100% worth it.
Absolutely.
So do you have some advice for folks that might be looking for a coach? What do you look for?
Yeah, that's a great point. So, I think there's a lot of different ways to receive coaching, right? And for me, I can say, I actually, when I'm facilitating, I like to work with groups. I've worked one-on-one before, but that just feels natural to me. Whereas like the coach I'm working with, she's a one-on-one gal. Like she only takes 5 clients at a time, meaning like I'm on the 6-month term right now. So like at any given time during the year, her 5 clients is max because it's very hands-on. So while we do have a coaching session 3 out of every 4 weeks, she takes a week to like do her own creative work, which is awesome. And I like her boundaries have really inspired me to work with her. We have 1 call a week, but we are in constant communication on WhatsApp. And so she's available with boundaries, of course, to coach through all these moments of life. So it's very, very in depth. And I knew at this given time in my life, because I was going through a lot of transitions, that I wanted the one-on-one. I've also done mastermind groups and all that. And the community aspect really served me, like in a more intimate mastermind. But I think for me, what I particularly in my life, I knew I wanted a coach that was not specific. Like the one I'm working with she very much understands the balance of like business in terms of like, I want to make money and be successful while also honoring this like feminine, spacious, flowy, earthy side of me that wants to hang out in my garden all day. And so I know that it's a little bit of everything when we go through things, and she's not going to sugarcoat. Like she's willing to be honest with me. And I think more than anything, she lives, like eats, sleeps, breathes what she preaches. Like I see her in her life. I can watch her in her life, and she's not like much on social media, but you can just see in the way that she has this joy for life and the way she approaches things and the life she's built for herself and the way she shows up to her work. You can tell that she is like living her passion. She cares so deeply, and she lives in a way that I admire and that I want in my life. And I think that's probably my most important thing, is to see that they are exemplifying something I'm trying to achieve, which brings us back to the sort of like professional Harvard degree or not. Like, I want to see that you're doing it. And I don't care so much about, like, I want you to have professional wisdom and like have invested in it. But I also want to make sure that you're living it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's great advice for finding a coach, and great advice for coaches, because the value of your lived experience as a coach cannot be overstated, right? Yeah, I just, this goes back to the beginning of our conversation, the Harvard thing, which is, sure, you can go get another cert. Absolutely. There's no shortage of them. And also, what have you experienced? What do you know? Who are you? How do you live your life? That trust building, that relationship building is what fills bank accounts and client rosters. Truly, it's true. Yeah, that's really useful advice for coaches seeking coaches and for coaches being coaches.
I think for me, I built a lot of my community on social media when it was earlier, and it was a little bit easier to do, to be honest. I'm not on TikTok. I'm still putting it off. But I do think that one of the things that I hear the most is that because I was vulnerable and I didn't show up honestly as like an expert, I showed up and said, I'm going through this and this is how I navigated it. I think that's led to my success in a lot of ways. And it's the thing I hear quite often, is that my vulnerability and humanness as I build this life that I have, where I'm building an 8-figure company, and it makes people inspired that they could do it too. Because if they see my vulnerabilities while they're also seeing my successes, then they say, hey, I could do that too. And I think for coaches, that's really important, because if they don't think you're human, if they think you're so far beyond what's possible for them, then they're not going to be able to see the potential, because they don't understand that you were ever once where they were. And so I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it just, I'm not an IG or Facebook. I just use it to just as evidence of my own life. This is how I live my life, sort of thing, is in terms of just social proof on the advice I'm giving to my clients. At this juncture, I've not used it to get clients, but somehow out of the woodwork, I get DM'd all the time. I would say the same thing in terms of like a health coach, just being authentic and sharing your story. And we hear this a lot from coaches, like, hey, I don't look like I popped off the cover of like Women's Health or Shape magazine.
Right.
I don't look like Marxist, and I don't look like whatever, who's going to hire me? And this is when we get into a conversation about your story and being authentic with who you are, and that you're walking the talk and you're doing it too.
And they just don't realize that what people actually need is I think in order to work with someone, they have to see a glimpse of themselves in that person.
Yeah.
In order to think that it's possible that they can get there too. And I think that for me, like my success has been built in a lot of ways on my vulnerability and my willingness to share and be open. And I think that's really cool. And so I think for coaches, like we all need different coaches, like we all need different people. We all resonate with different people at different times based on our life. And I think that's why telling our story and being open like that is really impactful.
Well, I've learned a lot. This is a really nice conversation, because speaking to somebody like yourself that's had a variety of success and continues to have success is just a really nice education, immersion, I guess is maybe the word. Immersing into the energy that you put out there is really useful for coaches to hear. It's nice to hear and be in presence of somebody who's successful. So thank you very much. So we would love to direct folks to follow you wherever it makes sense to follow you. Where can they find you?
Mostly I'm on Instagram. So my Instagram is at Danika Brysha. And then Self-Care Society is at Self-Care Society. Our website is myselfcaresociety.com. And Model Meals is modelmeals.com. And yeah, I mean, that's really it. I'm mostly on Instagram and teaching on Self-Care Society. So
wonderful.
Love it. Awesome. Thank you so much, Danika.
Thanks for having me.
So fun.
Yeah.
This podcast was brought to you by Primal Health Coach Institute. To learn more about how to become a successful health coach, get in touch with us by visiting primalhealthcoach.com/call. Or if you're already a successful health coach, practitioner, influencer, or thought leader with a thriving business and an interesting story, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us at hello@primalhealthcoach.com and let us know why we need to interview you for Health Coach Radio. Thanks for listening.